Welcome back to the deep dive. We get some pretty interesting material sent our way, but honestly, the sources we've been digging into this week, they're well, there's something else entirely.
Definitely in a league of their own,
We're
yeah.
talking articles, sure, but also internal memos from the Justice Department, even an old Life magazine report, and it all centers on this almost unbelievable figure, a mob contract killer named Harold Königsberg.
Kyle Königsberg.
And the hook, the really wild part, is the connection. The listener who shared all this, Harold's grandnephew.
Exactly. It just throws this whole thing into sharp relief.
It really does. It's this fascinating and frankly disturbing contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got the sheer brutality of his life estimates of maybe 20, some say even 50 killings.
50, wow. Yeah.
And then on the complete other side of the coin, you have his brother, Leo Königsberg, running what seems like a totally normal, successful wholesale food business.
Right. So the big question driving this deep dive is, well, how? How do you get these two incredibly different paths springing from the very same family? That's what we need to unpack.
Okay, so let's start with Leo, the legitimate brother. He sets up Leo L. Königsberg Foods back in '55, Bayonne, New Jersey.
And it wasn't some, flash in the pan thing. He started small, like one delivery route, a driver, maybe a couple of trucks.
But he built it up, solid business. Those red delivery trucks apparently became quite a familiar sight around Hudson County.
Absolutely. And his reputation was everything to him. He wouldn't go near anything shady. There's this story, right, about a robbery at his brother's place.
Harold's place.
Yeah. And what really bothered Leo wasn't the money. It was the newspaper headline, Königsberg's brother victim of safe robbery. The family name that meant the world to him.
That really sets the stage, doesn't it? This
Yep.
successful, respected local guy.
It absolutely does. Which makes the story of his younger brother Harold even more jarring.
Yeah, talk about jarring. The sources paint this picture of someone law enforcement called the most dangerous uncaged killer on the East Coast.
And that Life magazine piece from '68 called him an animal on a leash for the mob. Said he'd kill for the fun of it.
Chilling. And the booking photo they mentioned, 3 officers struggling to hold him up, but his face is just calm.
Totally serene. It's bizarre. It kind of speaks to this, maybe this audacity, this belief in your own invincibility you sometimes see, even in that world.
Okay, but here's where Harold's story gets even stranger, right?
Mhm.
Because he wasn't your typical mafia soldier tied to one family.
No, exactly. Kayo, as they called him, he was a freelancer, took jobs from different mob crews.
Which earned him these, like, almost contradictory nicknames. Smartest hitman, but also toughest Jew. Which was apparently notable because Jewish involvement in that kind of organized crime was supposed to be fading then.
Right. And it wasn't just the hits. The DOJ saw him as the absolute king of all loan sharks, had multiple offices, claimed he had $1 million out on the street.
$1 million back then.
Huge money. And get this, he apparently taught himself to read as an adult. Yeah. And then proceeded to act as his own lawyer in major trials. Took appeals right up to the Supreme Court.
That's just incredible. This mix of brutality and, well, brains, I guess.
It's a really unusual combination. You have to wonder why he was so independent. Was it just him? Did he not trust anyone?
Good question. Maybe we see some of that in the Castellito job, 1962.
Ah, yes, Anthony Castellito. Teamsters guy, secretary-treasurer, seen as a potential rival to the union president, Tony Provenzano. Tony Pro.
Who was also a big deal in the Genovese crime family, right? Kapoor regime.
That's right, a captain.
Yeah.
So Tony Pro wanted Castellito gone. Simple as that.
And Harold gets the call, the price, 15 grand plus a cut of union profits.
Not bad for the time. He brings in a couple of other guys. Salvatore Berguglio, known as Sally Bugs, and Salvatore Sino, or Big Sal.
The plan was an ambush at Castellito's place up in Kerhonkson, New York, his country house.
Yeah, and Castellito wasn't exactly an innocent bystander himself. Made his money from illegal gambling, loan sharking, shylocking.
He even agreed to give Big Sal a ride up there, thinking he was helping him lay low.
Uh-huh. Walked right into it. The place itself sounds kind of idyllic almost. Prefab house, screen porch, horses, a mobster's retreat.
But inside, not so idyllic.
Not at all. Sally Bugs apparently jumped Castellito. He fought back, but then Harold. Well, Harold used a cord from the Venetian blinds. Strangled him.
Grim, and they buried him somewhere in Jersey.
You're a dumping ground, yeah. Freehold Township. Just gone.
What happens next feels like something out of a movie script. Harold goes to see Tony Pro.
Who has the perfect alibi, naturally. Flew down to Florida to get married that day.
Convenient. And Big Sal, the guy who helped. Never got paid, then just disappears.
Vanished, presumed dead, almost certainly. Then Tony Pro turns on Harold, sets him up at a place called the Cabana Club.
Harold gets shot but actually escapes.
He does, manages to get away, finds a mob doctor to patch him up, remove bullets, buckshot, the works.
It shows you he wasn't someone to mess with, even by the mob standards.
Hmm.
Always navigating this treacherous freelance path.
Absolutely. Constantly walking a tightrope. Which brings us to the family angle. How did they deal with all this?
Well, mostly by not dealing with it. It was a massive secret, right?
Deeply hidden. The author, Harold's grandnephew, he stumbled onto it almost by accident. A groundskeeper mentioned something, then a retired detective.
And his own father's reaction was pretty intense. Basically, don't you dare write about this.
Total silence. Denial, even. The father tried to say Heshi, that was Harold's Yiddish name, wasn't really part of the family.
But then, out of the blue, 1997, Harold himself calls the author from prison.
Yeah, a voicemail from Auburn Correctional. Serving life. He even rattles off his nicknames. Kaio, Boom Boom, Bayonne Bomber, Hershey. Explained Kaio came from his boxing days.
It's wild how this real guy, Kaio Königsberg, kind of seeped into fiction too. Became the model for characters in books by Sidney Zion and Peter Moss.
Right, that archetype of the tough Jewish gangster from Jersey. There's that quote about one of the characters, Cagney Cohn. His existence could turn you into an atheist. Really said something.
Yeah. And people saw Harold himself in such different ways. Some thought he was this endearing eccentric.
While others were just plain terrified. And the stories are legendary, aren't they? Surviving 17 gun battles.
Yeah. And being amazing with counting cash, ordering 2 steaks at dinner, the whole barstool incident.
Where he beats up some guys single-handedly and the cops can't even break the stool leg he used. Classic.
Even his own lawyer, Raymond Brown, called him his favorite client. Told that story about getting Sinatra to sing for Harold's wife.
But then you have Murray Kempton, the journalist. Initially fascinated, then completely disillusioned. Warned about looking too closely at your heroes. It's just layers upon layers.
So many contradictions. Which must have made it incredibly intense when the author actually started meeting him in prison, starting in '98.
Oh, definitely. That first meeting, Harold ignores the handshake, kisses him on the mouth instead, shows this sudden, almost theatrical interest in family he never knew.
And asks for Dr. Peppers and ice cream sandwiches.
Right after saying he wields the power of life and death, the juxtaposition is just stark.
And Harold had an agenda, didn't he? He wanted the author to write his life story.
Yep. Fictionalize it, sell it to the Weinstein brothers, apparently. Working title, From the Ashes of Hell to the Power of Heaven.
Wow. Grandiose much.
Just a bit. He claimed he'd been offered big money years before, back in '68, by Random House, Time Life, MGM. Who knows if that was true?
But you can see the bind the author was in. Part relative, part journalist. Hearing these awful things, crimes Harold was never even charged with.
A total ethical minefield.
To really get Harold, maybe we need to rewind. Look at his background.
Yeah, definitely. His great-grandparents came over from Eastern Europe, met in Bayonne. His father, Mendel, was in construction, actually worked on the Bayonne Bridge, poured concrete for the Jersey side.
Harold was the youngest of 5. Big baby, apparently. And there's that weird family story about his hair.
The blonde ringlets they didn't cut for years. And his sister saying he turned into the devil once they finally did. Yeah, adds to the mythology, I guess.
His own story about getting into crime is pretty blunt, though. 13 years old, a crap game.
Pulls a gun on an older kid tied to the Black Hand. Said that's when he began to understand organized crime.
And his father, Mendel, knew people. Even took Harold to meet Abner Longy Zwillman.
Right. Zwillman was a huge figure back then. Basically organized the mob in Jersey early on. Mendel had some connection.
So Zwillman takes Harold under his wing.
Pretty much. Harold becomes his driver, bodyguard, gets into bootlegging, running numbers, starts making serious money, way more than his family.
Living the life, seeing Zwillman's fancy lifestyle, drops out of school before 8th grade, racking up arrests.
And immersed in it. Which makes you wonder, how much did the rest of the family really know or admit to knowing?
His sister said they kept it separate, but Mendel, the father, had his own little bootlegging thing on the side.
Yeah, and that story about Leo, the good brother, getting pulled over, driving their dad's homemade plum brandy, the Slivovitz.
So maybe not entirely separate worlds, though Harold apparently called Leo so pure.
The contrast remained. Then comes 1950. Harold gets hit with a big sentence, 14 years. Armed robbery, assault.
And the family is told, What? He's working for the government.
Yeah, that was the initial story. They only found out the truth when they saw the return address on a letter from prison.
But Leo still visited him. Even arranged special food.
He did. Despite hating that whole world, he'd bring these elaborate, non-kosher meals Harold requested. Family loyalty, I guess. But after Harold got out, things changed. They mostly kept their distance, wouldn't take gifts from him.
He did get married, though, in 1960.
Yes. And the period right after prison, say 58 to 63, seems to be when he was most active criminally. Bookmaking, hotels, hijacking, trucking, all sorts of rackets.
Leveraging those connections with different mafia families, the FBI even had his office bugged.
But the main thing, the core business, was always loan sharking, money lending. They raided his office once, found ledgers, handcuffs.
Handcuffs.
Yeah, and wiretaps caught him talking about the rackets, explaining his crazy interest rates.
He had this justification for it all, didn't he? Saw himself as just a businessman enforcing contracts.
A very warped view. Said the curse of his business was dealing with scumbag cocksuckers, as he put it. But the victims, often just regular people caught in his net.
Like that guy, Joseph Zavod, real estate speculator, borrowed money in 63.
Exactly. Zavod was already in a tight spot financially. Harold gives him $13,500, which somehow becomes $25,500 due in 1 month. Predatory doesn't even cover it.
And the threats were immediate. Gun, lead-filled hose.
Right there in the first meeting, when Zavod couldn't pay, Harold just shows up at his house unannounced, goes through his stuff, insults his possessions,
And basically forces him to sign over the house deed.
left him practically penniless. Just brutal. And there were other cases, similar patterns. Albert Hayutin in Denver, Joseph Canestracci, the stockbroker.
Canestracci got beaten badly, right? With copper wires.
Horrifically. Threats against his family, too. Just pure terror tactics.
So eventually this catches up with him. Arrested in October 63. Charges in Philly, too, because Zavod went to the FBI.
Right. And then Canestracci, the stockbroker victim, gets murdered the day after Harold's New York trial was supposed to start. Very suspicious timing.
So Harold's facing charges, but he finds a way to play the system even from jail.
Oh, yeah. He maneuvers to serve time in Jersey first, maybe thinking it's easier, ends up in Hudson County Jail and basically runs the place, pays off the warden, gets a private apartment in the library.
Seriously, an apartment in the jail library.
Had visitors, amenities. There were even rumors he slipped out at night sometimes.
Joseph Bonanno, the mob boss, apparently said Harold could manipulate any situation no matter where he was.
Seems about right. He just drew people in, lawyers making money off his tips, people coming to his jail parties. This weird vortex, as the author calls it.
He tried manipulating his trials, too. Wanted to pay Joe Louis, the boxer, to sit with his supporters.
Yeah, hoping it would sway the jury. Didn't work. His lawyers described him as both ingratiating and terrifying. A tough client, you imagine.
And he was constantly making demands on the author during those prison visits, too.
Always. Wanted favors. Wanted to be put on lists as a paralegal assistant. Just constant manipulation. It led to some tense moments.
Like that visit where Harold just lost it.
Yeah.
Threatened the author.
Yeah, a really ugly scene. Harold gets angry. The author tries to leave, and Harold hits him with these Yiddish phrases and that chilling line. By the mouth, the fish dies.
Creepy. You can feel the author's unease growing in the source material. Started staying in hotels further away.
Strained phone calls with his dad, and then that final terrifying meeting. Harold rejects the food the author brought, demands Lunchables instead.
Lunchables, after all the fancy meals Leo used to bring him.
The irony, right, and then just lays into him, explicitly threatens to kill him. Horrific graphic details.
Yeah.
Just, wow.
So while all this family drama and manipulation is happening, Harold's also playing games with the legal system. Facing that Manhattan trial, he fakes being sick.
Claims he has a brain contusion, which leads to these endless sanity hearings. Psychiatrists disagreeing, Harold showing up in court on a stretcher in a wheelchair. Pure theater.
But behind the scenes, the government knew he was faking.
Records showed he was perfectly fine when not in court, manipulating other inmates, pretending to be paralyzed. And then comes the big twist. He starts secretly talking to the FBI.
Cooperating. Harold Königsberg.
Offers them info on the Cosa Nostra. Wants protection, money for his family in return.
Was the FBI buying it?
Hoover himself was wary, told his agents to be careful, even flagged Harold's wife being Italian as a risk. But they went ahead. Harold meets with agents, gives them mafia structure charts.
And then confesses to his own hits.
Yeah, admits to multiple murders, even leads them to that mob graveyard in Jersey. They dug up bodies believed to be his victims.
But the FBI had a bigger goal, right? They wanted Tony Pro for the Castellito murder.
That was the main prize. The Justice Department, maybe pushed by Robert Kennedy's focus on the Teamsters, was willing to deal. Drop the extortion charges against Harold if he helped find Castellito's body.
So they move Harold to a special prison medical center. The Philly case gets dropped. It looks like he's got a deal.
He takes the marshals out to Freehold Township, points to a spot. They dig for 2 days. Nothing.
And Harold just says, oops, must have moved it.
Pretty much. So no body, no deal. He gets hauled back to Manhattan for the extortion trial.
And goes right back to his old tricks. Tries to get a mistrial, fires his lawyer.
Represents himself with
Wow.
his paralegal assistants. Shows up looking eccentric. Bullies witnesses. Constantly fights with the judge. Gelanoff.
There were some fiery exchanges there, weren't there?
Oh, yeah. Harold being sarcastic, Gelanoff finally losing it, calling him a faker, but also one of the most brilliant people he'd ever seen. A real piece of work.
The verdict comes back split, but he still refuses to admit he's the same guy with prior convictions.
Leads to a whole separate trial just to prove he is who he is. Ends up getting a stiff sentence anyway. Gelanoff quipped he might become a constitutional lawyer.
But still, no murder charges, despite confessing to the FBI.
Nope. No body, no eyewitness for Castellito. The FBI agent was furious, apparently. Said Harold beat the system.
So why did Harold talk? Just for sport?
Manipulation. Seems likely. A mix of things, maybe. Self-preservation, revenge, just enjoying the game. He apparently told someone, catch me on something, like a challenge.
And that FBI agent, he actually said he liked Harold.
Bizarre, right? Shows how manipulative Harold could be. Even after the trial, he's questioned again, confesses to another murder. Johnny Earl gives details that check out. Admits to 5 more killings.
And still, nothing they could use in court.
Nothing stuck. The detective involved basically said Harold outsmarted them all.
The story doesn't quite end there, though. What happened to Big Sal Sino, the other guy in the Castellito murder?
Ah, Big Sal. He'd fled to Milwaukee, terrified of Tony Pro, tried to patch things up later, but eventually flipped and told the FBI the whole Castellito story.
Which led to the murder trial in '78. Harold and Tony Pro finally charged together.
That's the one. Took place in this kind of chaotic courtroom, young DA handling it.
And Harold, even with a lawyer at first, finds a way to get his conviction overturned.
On appeal, yeah. He dug up some procedural error or something. There's that weird detail about them ordering 4-pound buckets of shrimp for lunch during the trial breaks.
Surreal.
So a retrial.
Yep. Harold represents himself this time, gets found guilty again, for good. Tony Pro died in prison eventually. And Big Sal, even in witness protection, got arrested for another murder later on. Just messy ends all around.
What about Harold's own family? His daughters?
Remarkably, despite everything, he apparently kept a relationship with them. They considered him a good father, according to the source.
It's hard to reconcile. And the other families involved? The Zwolmans changed their name?
Trying to escape the association, yeah. And the daughter of another bookmaker Harold dealt with wouldn't talk specifics, but didn't feel shame, just accepted it.
But the impact on the Zavad family, the ones who lost their house, that lasted for years, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Joseph Zavod faced financial ruin, IRS audits, indictments, even a conviction later. Died after trying to start over with a pizza place. His son Alan remembered driving past their old community center.
The one his father lost.
Yeah, and just flipping it off. Years of bitterness there.
And Anthony Castellito Jr., his father was the one murdered by Harold.
His story is heartbreaking. Worked for years in Tony Pro's union local wrestling with that. Never found out what happened to his father's body. His mother died not knowing.
He remembered Harold saying something insensitive during the trial, too.
About hard work. The irony. Coming from Harold Königsberg. Just devastating for the victims' families.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, we're left with this image of Harold Königsberg that's just full of contradictions, aren't we?
Incredibly complex. Brutal violence right next to this cunning intelligence, manipulation, even these strange flickers of family connection. His actions left this undeniable dark ripple effect.
On his own family, and especially on the families of his victims.
Yeah. Which leaves us, and leads you listening, with a final thought, I suppose. What does digging into a life like Harold Königsberg's really tell us? About crime, sure, but also about family loyalty, how twisted that can get, and about justice, how hard it can be to find.
What makes someone live like that? And what are those hidden costs, the ripples we don't always see? from choices like his.
It's a lot to think about, the different perspectives, the things we still don't know. It's a really dark, really compelling piece of American history.